Um, hello, welcome everyone to our fangirling session with Bella Andre. Hello, Bella.
Hello.
So lovely to have you here. Bella really needs no introduction in the romance community, but just in case you've been hiding under a rock or something, Bella has lots to her name. She's sold more than 8 million copies of her books. She's coming to us today from California.
Yes.
Right? Yes. She divides her time between London, California, and is it like the mountains?
Upstate New York.
Okay, upstate New York. Oh, it sounds wonderful. Yeah, I'll just read a bit more from her bio. So she's been a #1 bestseller around the world with her novels, appearing on the New York Times and USA Today bestseller list 90 times. That's amazing. Publishers Weekly named Oak Press, the publishing company she created to publish her own books, the fastest growing independent publisher in the US. She also writes sweet romances as Lucy Kevin, and she's married with 2 kids as well. So thank you so much for joining us today. I was hoping to take you right back to the beginning. I know you've been writing for, would it be almost 20 years now? Would that be right?
It's like, wait, no, it was just yesterday, but when was that? 2003 was when I wrote my first one. So my God, yeah, almost 20 years.
Wow. And sorry about my Aussie accent. Hope you can understand me. So yeah, was it a long path to get published, or it seems like you had sort of quite big success straight out of the gates? Is that true?
Well, yeah, no. So before I started writing books, I wrote songs, and so I never thought I'd write books. I had always been a huge romance reader, and like a book a day reader, which I still am. If I can squeeze it in, I'm just a big romance reader. So I was a songwriter and a performer, and I recorded 4 albums, and I toured around the world. And then one day I woke up and I was like, oh my God, I'm married, and I have a house and a dog, and it just kind of, things shifted, and I ran into my old college roommate who had always wanted to be a romance writer, interestingly enough. And so we started talking, and she said, oh, have you heard of this thing called Romance Writers of America? No, because I had never thought about writing romance before. And she said, oh, well, I want to go to a meeting, but I'm nervous about going by myself. Go with me. And I went to that first meeting in San Francisco, and literally like my entire view of the world changed. I had no idea people could, I had read all the books, but I had never thought about the writing of the books. And it was like, oh my gosh, all these amazing women, and they were so smart and funny, and they were announcing their book deals, and some of them had been writing books 10, 20 years. And I came home and I said to my husband, all right, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to start a book. And I wrote the first 3 chapters of a book that afternoon because I was just so super excited. But I'm trying to think, it was how many years until I sold? I guess 3 years until I sold a book.
Yeah.
So I sold that first book to Simon & Schuster, the first sort of full-length book, and then it kind of went from there. But I was definitely not an overnight success. I made the sale to Simon & Schuster and kind of continued with that with publishers for about 8 years.
Okay.
And at the end of that 8 years, I was dropped from my publisher for lack of sales, and my sales just hadn't been great the whole 8 years.
Okay.
And that was when I started self-publishing. And then when I started self-publishing, I had quite quick success out of the gate. So of the 8+ million books I've sold almost all of them independently. I sold very, very few books when I wrote for publishers.
Wow. That's amazing. So how did you as a writer sort of keep that self-belief, like over those years when you know, you weren't making as much coin.
Yeah.
How did you? I think that's the hardest thing to push through as like a newbie writer, to sort of keep that belief, to keep going. What was it within you? Do you think?
Yeah, no, I think it was a combination of things. First of all, it all goes back to the fact that I am a romance reader to my core, and I have such a strong love for the genre. And you know, when you've read a book a day since you were like 10, 11, 12 years old, that's a lot of romances that I had read. And so I think those books became a part of my DNA in a way, right? And in a way, I always sort of joke that I gave myself an accidental PhD in romance novels, because, you know, it became my blood, my veins. It was like every part of me, without ever sitting down and really analyzing a book or really thinking about writing one, I had just taken so many in by the time I sat down to write one. So really, like 20 years of just, that's what I did during my spare time. A book was with me at all times. And so I think my love for it makes you so passionate that you're like, oh, I get to do this. I didn't really think about it so much in terms of, oh, I wish I could sell 1 million copies, or I wish I could pay more bills with it. It was like, oh my God, I can't believe I get to do this. And then at the same time, I found an amazing group of writing friends, and you know, we would meet at Starbucks in the afternoon to write most afternoons. You would try to meet, you know, for a writing retreat, maybe in Lake Tahoe or something. And that is just so much fun. You know, your friends, everyone's so excited. If someone sells a book, oh, you know, you have the big celebration. So it was that kind of combination that made it, I would never have given up. I would have kept going forever, doing it exactly as I was. But when circumstances changed, that's when it made sense for me to pivot from traditional publishing, which had basically closed the doors on me at that point. When this new world of Kindle and self-publishing and everything opened up, this was 2010, it just made sense to move in that direction at that point. But it was, you know, it was nothing that I could have planned. Like, you know, 10 years earlier, I couldn't have said, oh, I'm going to do this, because that route really didn't exist 10 years before that.
Do you think it's as easy today to like indie publish and have success, or is the market a little bit more flooded now? Like, do you think have things changed in indie publishing?
Well, yeah, no, it's a good question. And there's sort of, you know, the answer can go either way.
Yeah.
Having started at the very beginning, so another thing I always say is, I was in there making fire with sticks.
Yes.
You know, nothing existed. There was no formatting programs. There was no virtual assistants. There was nothing. There was no support whatsoever for what I was doing and the early kind of self-publishing authors doing it. You know, there was a group of us, or sort of a core group of us. We would find all the bugs in all the author platforms and all the retailers. We would be called, and one of the retailers called a group of us in because they were sort of building, they were just about to launch an ebook store, and they wanted to show us the author platform. So it was very much like an interactive process, but it was so difficult. I remember spending at one point, you know, early on, this must have been early 2011. I remember one week in early 2011 where all I did was try to get the formatting to work on a book.
Wow.
And it was virtually impossible to get it to look good. I mean, it was all that. So none of that support was there. So I guess you could say that maybe the market was slightly less crowded, except it wasn't, because you still had all the big name authors. You still had all the #1 bestsellers. You still had everybody, you know, all the big name authors were already there, and all the authors that the publishers were pushing were already there. So I think what I like about authors who are thinking about doing it now, I always say, you know, if you start now, in 4 years, you're going to be so happy you started now. Wherever it is, start now. And the amount of support, you know, for advertising support, marketing support, authors who can tell you, you know, there's classes. It's just a world of things that just didn't exist 10 years ago. So I just think there's never a better time to start than now. And everybody that I know who didn't start 4 years ago, didn't start 2 years ago, because it already seemed too crowded. Oh, they regret it so much by the time they actually start. And the conversations that we always end up having are, oh, if only I had started 2, 4, 6 years ago, whenever it was. So I just think it's still an absolutely fantastic time to go out there. And there's so much information now on how to self-publish and market your books. It's amazing to me.
Yeah. So well done you for pushing through with all the frustrations. But that's what you seem to be. You seem to be good at, sort of, like, you know, the creative side and the kind of the business side. Like you're happy to, like, design covers and, you know, do the marketing and so where does that sort of side of you come from? Is it just you just like to give everything a go, or what is it? How do you manage to do so well with marketing, the technical stuff?
Well, I think I mean, at my core, I'm like, you know, I have 2 hats, and I've always had them. Like, I can kind of look back to when I was a kid and various, you know, thoughts or dreams and ideas. So I've always been, you know, the artist. I was a performing singer-songwriter, and I wrote songs for other artists before I transitioned, right? So that is, you know, who I am. So consequently, I write a lot of, like, rock star characters, you know, because I love that world. And as my copy editor says, she's like, you just know it so well, you know, so I love that world. But at the same time, you know, and so when I talk about my different hats, it's like there's my artiste hat, right? You know, where I'm weeping over my keyboard.
Yeah.
And then I take that hat off and I'm the entrepreneur. And so I think, you know, in another life, I could have very happily, if I didn't have that artist side, I would have very happily been, like, you know, a CEO of something. Right. And so that is, I do really love that. And I do really love running a business and really, you know, thinking about ways to innovate. And that's part of what was so exciting about really the independent publishing revolution was, and is, it's still just so much innovation. And, you know, I used to call it the wild, wild west. You know, that it's what it was initially. It was like we were all down there in the trenches, you know, starting those firewood sticks and just trying different things and thinking outside the box. And that's always, even, you know, now 10 years later, it's that thinking outside the box that I think that really, really helps continue to introduce my books to new audiences. You know, looking into different languages. I've translated almost everything into German, and there's my dog barking. Barking outside the door. And I am going to be publishing my full catalog in French and Italian.
So you get that translated yourself?
Yes, so I have a team of translators in Germany who are amazing. And then I have just hired a team of translators in France and in Italy. So I'm really super excited. I'm also going to be releasing audiobooks in German from my German translations. So it's fun to kind of keep, you know, building this thing. Like it sort of always keeps getting bigger and bigger. Oh, there's the delivery guy.
Oh my gosh, it's all happening. You love it.
There's a lot going on out here. Teenagers outside the door. Hi, you yes, man. Okay.
Do you need to get the door?
No, everything's done.
Okay. So yeah, you are also a mum of 2.
Right, I have 2 teenagers. Yeah, I have a 14 and a 16-year-old.
Wow. So how do you? Wow. So how do you kind of manage all bits of your life? Like, what's the day in your life like?
Well, I mean, it's different now. I mean, it changes all the time. I'm very active, and so my husband and I usually get up, do a long walk or hike, and then a long bike ride. And then I get down to the computer. And sometimes before we head off, I'll deal with sort of some emails that really need to be dealt with in maybe the first hour of the day. But I'm out. I like to be active for 2-3 hours. And then, yeah, come back and eat some lunch. And usually the afternoons is when like last week, I just turned in a new book, but last week I was doing my final pass revisions on a new book. So that would be every afternoon. And then at the end of that, if I hadn't dealt with whatever emails I needed to deal with in the morning, I'd come in for an hour and sort of deal with stuff and then go swimming. So, yeah, no, I like to be moving, and I find that fuels me a lot. So I think that all adds up, with the creativity. And it's funny because my dad sent me a link to an article last week where he said, "No wonder why you're so creative." And it was an article about writers who were known to be big walkers throughout history. Yeah, no, it was fascinating. And a lot of psychologists who have studied movement and creativity. So I thought that was fun. But I think for me, it keeps my spirits high, and I don't, because I'm with my husband doing all of that. I'm not usually by myself when I'm exercising. I'm not actively working on a book, but I think a lot of stuff goes on in the subconscious.
Yes, yeah. It's your creative thinking time.
Yeah.
So how long are you actually at the computer?
I used to be out a lot. So I would say the first 8 or 9 years of self-publishing, certainly, a lot. 7 days a week, 10 to 15, 20 hours a day. I mean, it was a tremendous amount. And now that my kids are both in high school and, we're kind of staring down the barrel of, like, my son will be in college in a couple of years. So I made a very active decision last year that I just wanted to bring the pace down, spend time with my kids before they go to college, and just relax a little bit more, enjoy life. So I'm probably at the computer now, and it depends on what I'm doing, but maybe 3 to 7 hours a day. So still a lot, but a lot less than I used to be.
Yeah, I like that mix. I'm sure it'll make a lot of writers feel less guilty. No, they don't have to be there for 15 hours. So just ask, because you're in America, so there's been a lot going on with like COVID-19 and the race riots and that sort of thing. Has any of that sort of filtered into your writing, or has it distracted you, or how's it?
I think, like most people, it's been hugely distracting on an emotional level, and it has clouded the brain. And what I found was sort of the first couple of weeks of lockdown, I found it very hard to concentrate on anything. And I feel like from what I saw online and talking to friends, that was pretty common. I think you're just kind of trying to process, like, okay, how has this happened, and what's going on? And then I actually found great solace in having that writing routine again. And so I actually started working more hours again, because I think it was nice to feel like I had a purpose and was moving forward with something, instead of sort of, maybe getting caught up in fear or stuff like that. So that really helped a lot. And of course, you're wrangling the kids because they're home, and the online schooling and all of that stuff. And then, with the protests and the riots, we live in a fairly small town in Northern California. So we've been sort of peripherally affected by that. But again, I just think the biggest part of it all is like the emotional weight and the mental weight, and then trying to kind of figure out like where you contribute and how you fit in amongst all of this. So I do think it's been quite a year for everybody around the world.
Yeah, very unexpected. Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see what stories, if there are many COVID stories and that sort of thing that result. You know, we'll see the fruits next year, maybe. I just wanted to talk about your Sullivan's series. Yeah, so is it 40 books now in the series, or is it more?
No, so the Sullivans, I just turned in book 26.
Oh, 26, sorry, okay. So what do you think people love about, you know, following a family tree like the Sullivans? Yeah.
I know what I like, right? So, you know, I was very inspired. So I published the first Sullivan in the summer of 2011. And previous to that, and I'd have to go back and look at when she put her first Bridgerton out. But, you know, I had loved Julia Quinn's Bridgertons. And I think maybe the first Bridgerton was out about 10 years before that. I'm not sure. I might be off on that. But I love the Bridgertons. And I always sort of remembered thinking, you know, once I started to write, I thought, oh, it's so funny, you know, why is nobody doing sort of a contemporary Bridgertons? You know, and that was really what it was for me. And so that was kind of the kernel of it. And then once I thought about it, you know, the characters become very, you know, real to you. And I mean, it just feels like they are real at this. I've lived with these characters now for, you know, 10 years. And so they're as real as anybody now. But I think that what my readers and what I love about them is it's the family connection. And so that's the core of what I write. So even if you look at like my Maverick Billionaires series, they're a band of foster brothers. They're not connected by blood, but they have an even stronger connection. And it's all about the family, the parents, you know, the cousins. So that's what I do. So when I wrote the Sullivans, I started with the first 8 siblings, the San Francisco ones. And I actually had no plans at that point to do more than 8 because Julia Quinn had only had 8 Bridgertons, right? So I just thought, well, I'll do 8. And I got to book 5. And I remember telling my husband one night, I just said, you know, I'm getting a little panicky. And he was like, why? And I said, because I'm almost out of Sullivans. It's coming so fast, right? Yeah. And what was so interesting was that was right at the moment when readers started writing and saying, there's going to be more, right? You're not going to end with the 8th one, right? And we all hit that at the same point. And so I was like, well, of course there's cousins, right? Of course there's cousins. I'm forgetting about them. Totally. Right? So that was when I did the Seattle Sullivans, and then I did the New York Sullivans, and right now I'm in the middle of the Maine Sullivans. And then I just launched last year the London Sullivans. So they're like, you know, cousins once removed, or, you know, whatever it is. No one can ever really decide what you call them, but yeah. So there's Sullivans in Europe now too. So the London Sullivans are kind of starting the whole European Sullivans. And then when I went to Australia and New Zealand a couple of summers ago, I was like, well, of course I gotta have Sullivans here. So.
So yeah, so no end in sight for the Sullivans.
No, I think I will write Sullivans till the end. So I will always write Sullivans, and I just love them, and I just can't imagine not writing Sullivans, I think is what it is. And you know, each book is its own standalone book. But you know, you can find the connections or make the connections if you want to or not. So it's kind of that perfect, you know, each one is a closed system, but they all can connect in one way or another, which I love as a reader.
Yeah, yes. Well, I love the little cameos and things like that. Sorry, you mentioned your husband. Is he very involved in your writing? Like, does he like help you with plots or the business?
No, none of the above. Yeah, no. So he does take care of my books. He does my accounting, which is great.
Right, those kind of books.
No one wants to do that. Like I don't want to be signed up for that. But no, I mean, when I started self-publishing in 2010, and then things really started to move in 2011. And that was, as soon as I put the Sullivans out, it was like things kind of went. So my husband actually, he owns his own software company. He was able to, you know, deal with that as he had to, but really took over, you know, making dinner, getting the kids to and from all their sports and classes. And we really kind of shifted positions really in the family. And, you know, it works out because I think I'm much more sort of the workaholic type A person, and my husband is very
chill.
Just like, he is the most mellow human being you will ever meet, which is, you'll laugh because I'm like, ugh. So he is super chill. So he's good with all the school stuff, and he likes like field trips and things, and you know, not as much for me. So I really quite like working. So yeah, so that was kind of how things, and that's how things have pretty much remained, apart from the fact that, you know, my kids are so much older now, they're very self-sufficient. So we're able to just kind of do more things, you know, together without worrying about little kids and all that anymore. But yeah, he's great. I couldn't ask for a better husband. He's, you know, the inspiration for all my heroes. So.
Oh, very romantic. Will any of your teenagers follow you into writing with their college, or?
Well, you know how it is. Like right now, I think the idea of doing anything that their parents do is like the worst idea ever. So at the moment, no. But it's funny, having been a musician before, my son in the last couple of years has taught himself piano, guitar, mandolin, ukulele. He just got a violin. He's incredible. Like, I did it for a living and I was terrible. So I do think some things sort of, you know, they kind of work their way through, even if you haven't sort of forced it on him. You know, he never wanted to take piano lessons. So it's not like I ever got him lessons, but he's just a musician. That's just who he is. He loves music. And then who knows what my daughter will do? She's a genius and she's a spitfire. So I'm sure she'll do something great. But you know, it's kind of hard to tell right now. 14.
Oh right,
yeah.
Okay, still, yeah. Who knows? Just a few more quick questions, and then we'll get a reader on to ask one. But I have to mention your groundbreaking 7-figure deal with Harlequin Mira. We were talking about the Sullivan series before, and to have that deal, they released the books just in paperback in the US, Canada, and Australia. But previously, that publisher had rejected you, so 10 years before. So that was, can you tell me a bit about that sort of experience going from rejection to this groundbreaking deal?
So when I had first started writing, when I was like, okay, I'm gonna write romance novels, I heard about Harlequin. I had read them, but I had never really paid attention to who the publisher was, so I didn't really know any of that. So when I first started going to Romance Writers of America in the meetings, it was like, oh, there's this company called Harlequin, and you know, they're very open to new writers and, you know, category novels. And I was so new to the idea of writing them. I was like, oh, what's a category novel? And all that, very, very much just trying to learn. And so I thought, oh, okay, well, maybe that's the easiest way to go. So I wrote some category novels, and I was, rejected soundly by Harlequin many times, saying, you don't have a category voice. Probably they just didn't like the books. I don't know, but no, it wasn't for them. And so I ended up, I went straight into single title, and I did not write for Harlequin. So what's interesting is, fast forward 10 or so years, 8 years, to independent publishing. So before I published The Sullivans, I published a couple of books that were sequels to books in my Bad Boys, a football series. So I did that, and that was as Bella Andre. But those were super sexy, and I sort of thought, you know, it would be nice if I could not just reach readers who like sexy contemporaries, but it'd be nice to reach readers who like sweet contemporaries, you know, and because I read it all.
Yeah.
So I had those books that I had tried to sell to Harlequin, and so I went and I grabbed them, and I had 3 of them, and I, you know, rewrote them, and I published them, and those were 3 of my big breakout indie books. And so I kind of created Lucy Kevin from thin air in the beginning of 2011, so I could publish these sweet romances. So that's what I did. And once I did release the Sullivans, later that year I released the Sullivans, and then I was doing Lucy Kevin books with the Sullivans as Bella Andre concurrently. Well, when I did sign the print-only deal with Harlequin, they signed up the Sullivans. But then they came back to me and they said, we'd also like your Lucy Kevin books.
Okay.
So what was one of the most fun parts about doing that deal was that one of the books that they had rejected, which was called Sparks Fly, was bought as part of that deal. So it was just a really kind of fun thing just to show, you know, it was, I mean, I rewrote it, but it was virtually the same book, you know, that was rejected. It just kind of shows, you know, we were talking about at the very beginning of the interview, how do you keep that spark alive? How do you not give up? And the thing is, you have to just, I think, believe in who you are as a writer and an artist. I mean, I know I use the word artist a lot, but I'm very much a weep over my keyboard, get chills while I'm writing. I'm a very emotional writer. I don't write personally, I don't write from a standpoint of an outline. I'm a very seat of the pants writer. I just try to follow the emotion of the characters. I then have great copy editors and editors who can look at the book afterwards, and if some weird thing is glaring to them, they'll say to me, you know what, that I'm not sure that works there. Very, very rarely though, because I'm very close friends with everybody who works with me, and they're like, no, she is off doing her thing, and they've learned to trust my gut. Like, we all just trust my gut, right? So even if something seems like, oh, I don't know if you can do that, I'm like, no, I feel it. I think it's working. And those books will be the books that the readers will say, oh my gosh, this is my favorite book. Because I just did something that was a little sort of different, but it felt really right for the characters or for the book.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Trust that gut of that magic of Bella Andre. Is that a pseudonym, by the way? Or you don't have to reveal your real name.
Yeah. So yes,
it's such a great name. So fans and readers will want to know what's coming up next for you. Can you tell us a bit about that?
So this fall in September, on September 23rd, my new Sullivan will be out. It's the 3rd main Sullivan, and I'm very excited about it. It's Lola Sullivan, and she's I do like writing the Spitfire kind of characters, and so she's a lot of fun. And I had a lot of fun writing that book. Just off to the editor, so happy that's kind of on its way. And then I've already started the next London Sullivan, so that will be next. I am pretty sure that will be next. And my co-writer Jennifer Scully and I are in brainstorming mode on the next Maverick Billionaire, so that will be Lissa's story. So anybody who reads the Mavericks will be happy to hear that Lissa's getting their story, because that's the main email we get now. Is Lissa's story next? Yeah, Lissa's story is next. And then I have another Lucy Kevin Married in Malibu book that I am drafting also. So I've got a few books, all the next books coming out in each series are either in process or going on up here right now. So that'll be kind of over the next year, 18 months that's what that'll look like. And then I'll have a lot, like I said, a lot of books coming out in French, a lot of books coming out in Italian, German audiobooks, and then I'm continuing to put out my books in German. So that's kind of what my whole publishing world looks like right now.
Oh my gosh, so much for fans. Malvina, we have a reader online, so I think she's going to ask a question. Is that right? Here we are. Hello. Hi.
Hi.
Oh, just the volume.
Thank you. Hello.
Hi.
Oh, it's nice to join in this session. You've answered actually a lot of my questions, because some of my statements were things like, you know, I'm just astonished at how much and how fast you write, and, you know, how do you keep the schedule up? But you've answered that. And it's obvious you love writing. I'm going to ask you, I've got a few questions. So does it come easily to you?
Oh, there's a good one. How about this? When it comes easily, yes. And when it doesn't, no. I mean, you know, like, right, the best ones are, and I've maybe had like 2 where out of, you know, I think I've written about 60 or 70 books now. I've had 2 books where I would call them almost gift books, where you kind of hold your arms out and it falls down into them. And, you know, you can't type fast enough, and the words are flowing and it all makes sense. And at the end of it, oh my gosh, right? I think the reality is, for most of what I do, I'm a big reviser. I'm not somebody who puts the words down and feels like they're gold and then moves on. You know, I get the draft down, and oftentimes it's not until I'm done writing that first draft that I really know what I'm talking about, right? That I'm like, that's who my hero is. Oh, he's been hiding from me, you know, for 80,000 words, and I figured it out in the last page. But that's the beautiful thing about it, because, and I like revising, because once I actually know the heart of who my hero is, the heart of who my heroine is, and what their story is, then I kind of sit back and I look at this whole big picture. And suddenly it's amazing how everything that was so cloudy when I was writing the draft is so clear when I'm revising it. It's like everything finally makes sense. And what I think is so amazing is how much stuff that goes into the first draft of the book where you're like, I don't even know why I'm writing them. But it's because subconsciously you know more than you think you know. And I'm like, oh my gosh, of course that makes perfect sense for what I know about my character now. So it's always, I think, a voyage of discovery, and I like to start it with pure narration. Some books have been half and half. Some books I've written in order from start to finish. Some books I've written the chapters, I've written the sections where I can visualize it in my head, and then I've pieced it all together at the end. I think I'm always kind of mixing it up to keep it interesting.
Thank you. Yeah, makes sense. One of my other questions, I mean, obviously you've got a tremendously full day, you know, with your exercise and adventures in the morning, and then sitting down to write, and family times in the afternoon, and or that you read a romance book a day. Mm-hmm. Now, is there still time in that busy schedule for you to read, I beg your pardon? And if so, you've mentioned Julia Quinn, who we all love, absolutely love. And if you haven't read her, well, start. That's all I can say. But have you got other favourite authors that you like to talk about as well?
So what's funny is, it was just a couple of days ago, I was saying to my husband, oh my gosh, you can tell how much I've been reading. Read a book. You know, if I'm reading in paperback, once I'm done with it, I'll give it away to the library, right? But because of all the lockdowns, the libraries don't, you know, want any books right now. Our library here still is not open. So, so instead I have a massive stack of books by my front door waiting to go. And those are just the books I've read since we've been on lockdown, just in paperback. And, you know, taller than like my one little bookshelf here, you know, it's just stacked full of books. So I am still a read every morning, read every afternoon, read while I'm walking. Like if my husband's not available for a walk, I go for walks and I read while I walk. And constantly before bed, it doesn't matter how late it is, I'm like, you know, I'll fly all night on an airplane somewhere and then I'll get into a hotel and I won't have slept in 24 hours and I don't go to bed until I've read, right? You know, it's just that I love reading and I think it like sort of calms me down and it makes everything right in the world. So I'm trying to actually look, I have a bunch of, I love British authors. I read a lot. That's sort of, I got a place in London a couple years ago, and my best friend who's British, she's a writer named Tasmina Perry, and she's absolutely genius. And actually the way that we became friends, who would have known we would become best friends, is I was like her biggest fan from America. And I got an email from a woman who was friends with her, who had wanted me to be a part of some anthology project, which I wasn't able to do. But in that woman's email, she said, oh, Tasmina Perry, you know, suggested that I get in touch with you. And I remember thinking, oh, Tasmina Perry knows who I am. So I wrote the woman back and I said, well, I can't be a part of that because my schedule is so packed. But if there's any way I could get Tasmina Perry's email from you. So we ended up connecting in London. And so that's just one of the most, I was kind of almost like her stalker fan best friend. So, so that's what we joke about. But I have some Katie Fjord that I'm waiting to read, some Fern Britton. I'm kind of looking at my bookshelf right now. Let me see who else. Harriet Evans. So those are kind of some people I'm reading right now. Very, very British-centric right now.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, excellent questions. So I think we have to. Was there anything else, or I think we have to wrap up otherwise. But we have to get Bella to tell us where's the best place to find you online.
So you can find me at bellaandre.com, and you can find me on Facebook. If you just do facebook.com/bellaandrefans, you can find me there. So, but just bellaandre.com, and then that'll move you everywhere you need to go.
Oh, beautiful. Is running a treasure hunt for readers to win prizes. So we have to hold up some codes. Do you have your code ready? So yeah, if we just hold it up to the screen. Yeah, beautiful. That should give them a bit of time to to note them down. I think that should do it. Thank you so much for talking and giving us all your secrets and insights into your life. It's been really, really wonderful. And also thank you to Malvina and all the other readers for tuning in. So thank you so much from Australia.
Thank you, Malvina. Bye.
Bye.